Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Tuesday, September the 18th, 2018. I am back in the office here in Wilmington, North Carolina. The power is on. No internet yet, so I'm having to use my mobile hotspot. It is good to be prepared, that is for sure. If you ever think you might need internet for business and you're just like, I can't go without, it's all depending upon, of course, as to whether or not the cell towers are functional. I use Verizon LTE hotspots, these little jetpacks. It's worth the money. You can just get a prepaid device, $50 or so for one of the cheaper ones, a couple $100 for the more expensive ones, and then you can pay like $100 for 10 gigabytes. And if you just need email and doing things like I'm doing here, it is well worth it. Of course, I use them also in our unmanned camera systems, and they are fantastic. And overall, the network seems to have stayed up from Verizon. That's what we use for our data. My phone is Sprint, and of course it has data within it, and it's all done pretty well. There's just a couple of areas in the rural parts of my journeys around over the past few days that had no service, but that was very limited, very few and far between. Luckily, Florence was not a major wind event in terms of its energy. Certainly the water has taken the stage here, rightfully so, as being the biggest impactor. But had it come in as a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale for wind, I think all of us would pretty much be in the dark for weeks to come. So there are things to be somewhat happy about. The flood is bad and is going to be bad, but at least we didn't have the Cat 3 winds on top of it. Small favors. So let's look at the map. It has calmed down quite a lot, and it's going to stay that way for a few days, several days, and then we're going to ramp it back up again, it does appear. And the latest on the remnants of Florence situated up here over New England, and it'll move out into the Atlantic, and I'll show you what I think is going to happen with that. And then we have Tropical Depression Joyce hanging around south of the Azores, and no other areas expected to develop in the Atlantic anytime soon. The Pacific Ocean, one disturbance here, I think this is 94E, and it'll bring some rain and some squally weather to portions of the Baja, and this other disturbance not really forecast to develop, as we are in sort of a sinking motion, a suppressed regime in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. This whole area over here really not going to see much activity over the next several days. The intertropical convergence zone kind of squashed to the south here, but we do have a flare-up of activity over in this region, and it might try to organize just a little bit, bringing the potential for some showers and storms for the southern windward islands here. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Nothing really robust developing in the model guidance. The remnants of Florence right up here, the energy associated with Florence, is now stretched out. It's really fascinating, as I mentioned, I guess yesterday or sometime recently, that Florence originated as a tropical disturbance over Africa, came out and made it all the way over, of course, to our part of the world, and now it's sitting up here over New England. That's just incredible. And meteorologically speaking, a wonderment of nature, how that can happen. Generated by energy over Africa, and then it makes its way across the warm Atlantic, and we saw the evolution that it took. And so what's going to happen with Florence? Well, if we look at the vorticity signature, again, a lot of the energy stretched out here, concentrated perhaps with a low-level center, of course, up over New England. And that could come south and turn into the warmer Atlantic down here and try to redevelop a little bit as a very weak surface low, but I don't think it'll become a big problem for anyone. Then down here, we do need to watch this energy to see if it tries to bundle. This chart shows us the vorticity, or the spin, in the atmosphere, and this is the signature for Joyce, nice and round. It just lacks any deep convection or thunderstorm activity to really boost it up, and as such, it's just nice and weak, but it does have a very well-defined vorticity signature. And you notice, too, off the coast of the Baja here, stretched out, not bundling, in a round appearance, and that's what I like to look for, to play sort of hurricane detective, which one of these is going to develop. You look for that vorticity bundling itself around a common center, and that's your big clue as to the health of a system. So that being said, we can look at the GFS. This is the 12Z version. This is eastern North America right here. There's Florida around the Gulf Coast. Here's the west coast of Africa over here. Big old high pressure area out in the middle of the Atlantic. The vorticity signature associated with stretched out Florence here. There's Joyce there. And just a little bit of energy showing up in the GFS down here to the south. So if I put this into motion over the next 7 days and we get rid of the telestration, you can see how, and this will just run a couple of times, the energy comes out over the Atlantic, tries to hang on just a little bit, and then it gets stretched out and sort of eaten up by this upper level low that itself could try to develop at some point. But all of that's going to stay out here well away from land areas. And then also you see this tries to do something, a feeble attempt at development, but some of that energy may try to get close enough to the Windward Islands, Barbados, and points south. We just need to keep an eye on it. You see right there in the early part of the animation, it's when it tries to sort of come together. And so we'll watch and see. It's just not a favorable time right now. The atmosphere goes through these periods of favorability and unfavorability, and we saw that for a good deal of latter July through all of August, and then boom, the switch flipped as it looked like it would based on some of the ensemble guidance, namely from the European and the JMA. I guess that's the Japanese Meteorological Agency or something like that. But again, look at the energy here coming off the eastern U.S. We'll focus on that one more time as the loop finishes associated with the remnants of Florence. Here we go. And the end of the frames right there. This is a week out. So there it is. Some of it gets whisked off into the Atlantic northern side, and some of it breaks off and heads south and east there. That'll be interesting to watch. More of a meteorological fascination for us weather nerds than anything else to worry about. Notice, too, just one more kind of, let me just go to the last frame because that's where I can best sort of illustrate this. At the end here, this is a week out. Notice, once again, giant ridging over where? The northwest Atlantic, eastern seaboard. And that'll set the stage once again for a lowering of pressures down here, and any disturbance that comes across, or if we get a monsoon trough that sets up over here, just an area of convergence and lower pressure along a line in the western Caribbean, eastern Pacific, then we could start looking for development after about a week from now. And that is well telegraphed by these meteorologists here that follow this kind of thing. And this is from Ben Knoll. I've been talking about him for a while, and he's saying, and this is about 18 hours ago that he tweeted this, that the latest ECMWF weeklies have arrived, and the prognosis is for a busy tropical Atlantic during October. Probably a few more storms to track in a few weeks' time. And so what this shows us is the time is right here. So this is the present. I'll highlight it in yellow. This is where we are now, and this brown color is associated with sinking motion over this area. And as we go through time, that changes over to this green color. I don't know why that little scale keeps popping up. It's gremlins. All of this starts to set up later in September as we end the month into October, and then the pattern, if you just look at where this is outlined, all of this is the Atlantic Basin, and we could have a very busy time of it, period. I mean, sinking motion in the Pacific, that's what all of this color in here shows. So negative in the Pacific, positive for the Atlantic. That's what it comes down to. And it's likely now, in my opinion, that we're going to end up with a busier than normal hurricane season. And I'm going to revisit that on Monday of next week when we do sort of a, all right, here we go, resetting the clock. What are we looking for as we get into October? I want to go back and look at the August update and some of the probabilities, especially from NOAA. It's never a guarantee. Nobody ever comes out and says, it is absolutely going to be below average this year, and I'm 100% certain of it. there are probabilities, and this is going to probably be, speaking of probabilities, a case where the lower probabilities of something happening ended up being correct. Does that make sense? Not an extreme case, but an exception to what was thought to be the most probable. Looks like that'll be the least probable, and I think we will end up with more activity than average, certainly by numbers of named storms, numbers of hurricanes, and the all-important ACE index, the accumulated cyclone energy. That is a measure of how much energy was actually expended in the Atlantic basin, and I think all of that will end up being below average. I think that, but I could be wrong. Maybe this burst comes and goes and we don't see anything from it, but we do need to be ready because, and this is really fascinating to me, a couple of things to look at. With the exception of the disturbed water out here from hurricanes, the MDR, the main development region, is now running above the long-term average. Excuse me. No question about it. There is also a neutral to warm neutral signal here in the Pacific. No overwhelming El Nino signal. And then, of course, the Northwest Atlantic, the North Atlantic, still running quite a bit above the long-term average. Those positive anomalies mean that there is a lot of energy still to tap into. The Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, running right about where it should be. No major deviations from normal either side of warm or cold. And let me show you, really, really cool to see here, at least from a meteorological perspective. Look, hey, hurricanes impact us, so don't ever construe any excitement that I have or any fascination that I display with meaning that I like people getting hurt by hurricanes, because nothing could be farther from the truth. Further from the truth, whichever. I get it. I lived through this with Florence. My family's evacuated, but you know what? We're doing well compared to a lot of other people. So I just want to make that disclaimer that I can look at this from a meteorological perspective of awe and fascination, but I also realize more than most people what impacts these can have. So just make that clear, because this is really fascinating. That energy came off of Africa, developed, one system turned out this way, you can clearly see, and then I guess that was Helene or Joyce, I don't know, but this is the one that matters. Wow, that's the track of Florence right into North Carolina. Isn't that just amazing that we can see that on the sea surface temperature anomaly chart? The hurricane took the energy out of the ocean, carved it right out of there. That is just remarkable how nature does that. It's just a shame that people live here, and we had to deal with it personally. It's just the way it goes sometimes. We have to just be resilient and bounce back. I know, easy for me to say, but I try to be positive. This is also a look at the track. Remember, it was coming to the northwest and it bent back. That being said, actual water temperatures in here still very warm, 27, 28, 29 Celsius in some places. So very much hurricane season still. Gulf of Mexico still very warm, 29 degrees Celsius, 30 with these green colors, and even 31 Celsius tucked away up here in the far northwest part of, well, what am I trying to say? South of the Mississippi Sound, east of New Orleans. Whatever, I screwed that up totally, but that's fine. It's still warm. We've got to pay attention, folks. I've said this before. Nature does not care. Last year should be a fine example. We had Harvey, then we had Irma, then we had Maria. And Irma and Maria were pretty much over the same general area. And look, it just can happen. North Carolina, South Carolina could get hit by another hurricane this season. And that's just the truth, okay? That's not, oh, don't say that. You can't ignore history. We've had them back-to-back before. But I'm more worried about the Caribbean and the Gulf, to be honest with you, the way the pattern looks like it's going to set up. So just stay alert. Don't say, well, that's it for the hurricane season. You know, fall weather's coming. It's football time. World Series is going to be coming up soon, you know, et cetera. Yeah, we can look forward to those great fall things, but we're still in hurricane season, and it's my job to keep you aware. Speaking of it being my job, just a quick reminder, support my work on Patreon if you can. A wonderful group of people, over 120 now, patrons. We're really making some progress here. When that paycheck comes through in October, I'm going to start reinvesting some of that into more equipment, get more of these camera systems, and just be better prepared, more battery packs. It's amazing what crowdfunding can do. So thank you so much. And breaking news for you, I think we solved the problem for the Android app. Somebody was helping out during Florence, doing some testing in the background, and we may have had a breakthrough. And as soon as I can get our developer, who's located here in Wilmington, once they're up and running again, I'll put an order in to make some modifications, and we can get that back on the Google Play Store for you to purchase. And then everybody that has the Android app from us, Hurricane Impact, already, an update would come out, and you'll be all set. And we'll have a complete 100% working version of Hurricane Impact on Android. Of course, the iOS version, I used it a lot myself. Talk about a testimonial. Come on. During Florence, and it was flawless. Every time I needed it to check something, it did, and I'm very happy about that. So you Android users, I promised you if I could, I would, and we have a great group of people that work with me behind the scenes, and I think we've got a solution. I will let you know for sure. All right, I'm done for today. I got a lot to do to go start rounding up equipment. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my website. Thank you so much for supporting me in all the ways that you have. I really appreciate it. I will have more for you tomorrow.